There being a forum, I'll call the meeting to order. Debbie, are you recording the meeting?
I am.
And Mr. Gant is recording the meeting. Is anybody else requesting recording the meeting? There being none, we'll move forward. I guess I'm gonna look at Kelly. I don't really know about number 2, so we had something about inspectional services.
Oh, yes, this
So
was
do I hear a
why Glenn is here. This should be very brief. I just we tried to add Glenn to the agenda for later on. Permit Link, as you know, is our new software program that allows us to allow for the process of applying for a permit online 24/7. When we first implemented the program, we weren't aware at the time that we didn't have the financial mechanism in place to allow us to pay the vendor the $10 fee that it costs the applicant. So what we need to do is go to the next town meeting and ask them to set up a special fund so that, well, actually, we need to set up a budget to pay for that $10 fee. The interesting thing, though, is that when someone uses Permit Link to apply for a permit, they're paying for that $10 themselves. So it's being self-funded by the person utilizing that as, call it a convenience fee, if you will. But because of the fact that we don't have another mechanism to accept the money and then pay it out of that fund, we do need to create a separate fund at town meeting. So Glenn had to go to the FinCom and ask for a special reserve fund transfer to deal with the temporary issue. Moving forward, he will be asking for an additional line in his budget for this expense, but it is completely self-supporting. I just wanted to make sure that there was no misunderstanding. This will be in the budget that Glenn will submit, but other than that, it's completely within guideline. And I just thought that Glenn should be here to answer any questions that might come up with respect to this, because to anybody who isn't familiar with his budget, it'll look like it's a new expense, and it is. However, it's completely offset with the revenues that come in from that Permit Link software and the application fee. So Glenn, I don't know if I missed anything.
No, that's pretty much it. It's we are online now, so and we've gotten our first permits with people submitting them online. It's a great program, you know. All the inspectors have their iPads, and you know, so they can check their you know, what they have for inspections, and you know, what the workload is. Anytime they can do it from home, they can do it, you know, from here, or you know, wherever they have access. Because one thing we don't have yet is a data card for one of the iPads. But it's a great program. It's very user friendly, simple to use, and like Kelly said, I put the $10,000 in there based on what we've been issuing for permits, because it's going up every year. Last year, I think it was 919 permits that we issued. So the 10,000 should be really close, you know, one way or the other.
Ironically, I think this is an expense we want to see go up higher, because it means that more people will be applying for permits, which means more permit revenue. So the 10,000 was the best guess based on volume that we actually will consider. Whatever isn't spent from that will of course go back to general fund at the end. There's other mechanisms to set this up, but we didn't want to even talk about, you know, revolving funds for this particular purpose. One of the reasons we're keeping Permit Link with the department budget as opposed to centralizing with all the other computer maintenance items is because we want to show that direct correlation between his revenues for his department and that expense. So we're trying to join those two things so that it's very obvious that we're basically a pass-through account. So the direct fee that's charged is going to be paid by the applicant. We just needed the financial mechanism and appropriation within the budget to allow for that to happen. But that's one reason why you'll see Permit Link software fees within the inspectional services budget, as opposed to the Board of Selectmen special budget where we pay for all the other computer maintenance items.
Professional services line item is the way Catherine recommended we set it up, and you know, for what it's worth, you know, we've already talked to the FinCom about this when I asked for the reserve fund transfer, and this is the way they wanted to handle it versus setting up a revolving account. So
I don't know if I'm remembering this right, Glenn, but in the contract, I remember that there was some fee that we had to pay once we went over a certain number of applicants. It was like, once we went over 500, there was another $500 fee. And it made me think when I went home, oh, it's gonna be actually more than $10 per person then because of this supplemental fee.
I don't remember of seeing that, and I have this same permit tracking software in West Newbury. We've had it for 2 or 3 years, and we do less permits than here, but we still have hit over that 500, and I've never gotten, there's never been anything other than the monthly charge. There is a fee if you add, we get 1 user for every 100 permits that we issue, all right? If you go over, you know, if you issue 600 permits and you want the 7th user, it's $1,000.
That's what I was thinking of. It was over some threshold, there was another fee that kicked in.
And that's what it is, but we don't have that, and we won't have a problem with that because it's, you know, the number of people on it they're good. And, it's a really good company to work with too. You know, we were the first, Western Newbury was the first one in this area to have it, and now Newbury has it, Salisbury has it, Merrimack has it, Groveland has it, Georgetown's looking into it, and now we have it in Topsfield.
Do they have the ability to pay online, or do they have to come into the town hall?
Right now, they have to come into the town hall, but we're hoping to set something up so that they can pay online. We
Is
just
there
have to
any
keep
additional cost to that, or is that part of the software contract that you already have?
There would be an additional fee that would be, if they wanted to pay for it online with a credit card, there would, whatever credit card company you use or whatever financial process there is, there's whatever the fee would be for that amount of money. They usually go by a percentage. So.
And if they use a check, if we're talking about maybe doing it the same way we do our property tax payments. So with Unibank, I think it's 25 cents or 50 cents. 50 cents a transaction, but they pay for it completely separate from us. And then if it's a credit card, there's a separate processing fee for that. But again, they pay it themselves.
Which when that payment went through, if I'm not mistaken, that gets added right onto it, right? Like,
Yes.
like using an ATM card.
Yeah.
Well, that's great if you do that, it frees up
I want to do it.
man hours here.
Yeah, we definitely need to do it. We just need to I need to work with Kelly and Barbara to figure out what the best way to do that is. And I personally think that there's some potential issues with people paying the correct fee with doing that. So I need to work out all of that stuff first so that we get it right the first time.
The other piece to that is more of a technical component, which is we want to make sure that the advances we've made with the Munis system in terms of handling the cash, tracking the money, that we don't lose any of the utility or functionality that we've built into Munis to track all the payments that we're talking about. So it might take a little bit more technical expertise before we get to that stage, but that's really where we're going, and that would be our integration between the process and the permitting process versus the payment process and then the management.
And it's great for them to be able to pay online because we can email them their permits. We, you know, the communications once they fill out the application, we have their email address so that the program tracks all of the emails that go out with what you sent, when you sent it, and everything. But the state also wants us to have somebody in front of us that we can match the photo on the license with the person, because sometimes people will take, the contractors are required to have the construction super's license and their home improvement contractor registration on their vehicle. And people have been known to take those numbers down and then apply for permits. So we have to, part of my job to make sure that they don't do that we're issuing permits to the guy that's on the license. I'm not even 100% sure that payment online and being able to just give them their permits online is you know, is a really good way to do it. I have to work through some of that stuff.
Are any of the other towns doing it online, paying online?
They're taking payments online, but if the fees aren't calculated right, if the program doesn't pick up on some little add-in that would be on the application, then the fee is wrong and they pay it, and then you have to go back and tell them that they owe you another fee, and so then if they did it by credit card, there would be another fee on their credit card. I want to avoid all of that, so, you know,
Phase two.
we're working on that. Maybe what we'll do is tell them they can't pay it until after, we've sent them an email telling them how much it is. You know,
Be great if the software calculated it based upon what they're asking to do.
Well, it will, it absolutely will, but if there's some little add-on thing that the software can't pick up on, and sometimes you get that with, mostly with electrical and plumbing permits.
And we also want to make sure that we're able to crawl before we can get up and walk and run. So I consider that to be sort of phase two of the project. We want to make sure that we've thought through all of the variations. We've gotten, you know, usage of this new process and this software under our belt before we start trying to grow it more. I mean, certainly that would be our intent, is to make it as convenient as possible for people to do business with the town, to give us the money that they need to give us in the most timely and efficient manner. That's our ultimate goal, but right now we really are trying to get used to the software, make sure it works for us, and deal with any tweaks. So I see sort of the payment receipt as the next phase of the project, which we can talk about later with the goals and objectives as sort of part of that all-around IT discussion that we'll be having. You know, how do all these pieces fit together? And without an active person or a in-house person supporting our IT function, it's going to take a little bit longer than we might have hoped, but that's the direction we're going in. And I think that you've been doing a great job just introducing this to us. I've heard that it's a lot easier for people.
Oh, it's a lot easier.
You know, to do it in your pajamas at home at midnight after you've been out on the job all day. My sister's in the roofing construction business, and she says it's the best thing. She doesn't know why it took so long for all of these towns to get on the bandwagon, because it just makes it so much easier to do business.
Well, eventually they're going to have a drop-down menu. We've already talked to them about doing this, and they're gonna have a drop-down menu, so when the contractor logs on, it's gonna be a drop-down menu for which town he wants to log into. So he's not gonna have to have a bunch of different usernames and passwords and that type of thing. So, you know, that'll be huge, because there's a lot of towns around that have it now, so.
There's no action by the Board of Selectmen, necessary. Any other board member have any questions or comments?
I was just looking for I wanna make sure that I have the board support, you know, when it goes to town meeting. FinCom, like I said, I've already talked to them about it, and this is, you know, kind of an informational thing for the board. So you're gonna look at my proposed budget, and you're gonna see another $10,000 in there, you know, for one line item. And the other thing that happened with the budget this year is between Mary Lou not being here and there being a salary difference and her longevity taken out, there was about a $2,000 reduction in the, close to a $2,000 reduction in the base budget.
So there's a way, Kelly, that you guys can track exactly how much comes in for permitting
Oh,
revenue?
absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely, we get a
This
report.
whole software product will produce annual reports for us
Great.
with all this information
Yeah,
without
and
the
it's,
duplication.
every month what happens is Permit Link sends me an invoice, and they send me a printout of how many of each different permit was issued.
Great.
And it takes seconds for me to just, I always check that, I always duplicate their report, you know, with the, you know, sitting at my desk, you push a couple of buttons and it's, you know, I can double check everything, so.
Okay.
It's a great program, very easy to use, very user-friendly. Diane loves it, who's the primary user of it. I like it because I can check to see what I have for inspections before I come in the morning without having to call her. Just do it while I'm having my coffee.
Still in your pajamas?
Yes.
Everyone's doing everything with your pajamas?
More information. Anything further?
I'd just like to say, I read the contract, it sounds good to me. I tend not to get involved in details about this, because I leave it to you and you to do that, okay? I talked to Glenn about it, and he said it's an awesome deal, awesome program, and so that was enough for me, and I know this guy's been involved in it, so I'm happy.
And the Munis part of it is still being maintained, because when she does her deposits for the department deposits, it's done through the munis thing, so.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It's good.
Thank you, Glenn.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks,
Glenn.
Glenn.
You want to stay and talk about signs?
Yeah, actually, I just want to say something really quick.
You had your chance.
I want to say something really quick about that. I drove through downtown this morning on my way in, and there were 3 signs. There were 3 of those little, stick them in the ground signs.
Dandelions.
Two of them were Daybreak, and the other one was a landscape company. But that's a far cry from what was down there before.
And so letters have gone out and folks have pulled them?
No,
they
no,
they
not
haven't
yet.
done
Nothing's
that.
happened yet.
Really? Isn't
Nothing's
it?
And
happened
you know
yet,
we need
but,
business, we don't even have to send a
Well,
letter.
that's great.
They've-
Well, some
Call
of
that
them,
downtown
I think some of
revitalization
them
talk.
went away when they did the Christmas walk. They
That
took
might
some
be-
of
so
them
they
down
might
to
be
do
back.
some decoration down there.
Uh-huh.
Anyway,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank
All right.
you.
2 or 3 of them
Glenn.
were,
And now the ground's frozen.
2 or 3 of them were
That was
laying on
in
the
our
ground.
plan, Dick. Were you pulling signs out of the lawn? The stroll?
Next is a contract matter for the Council on Aging. You want to come on closer?
You gonna sit up here?
Slide your chair right up here.
All right. I'll get this back up.
Hi.
Hi.
Your hot seat? All right, great. So, want to start with that, because there's kind of 2 different,
Yeah, we must have the contract.
sure, yep, so the formula grant.
Mhm.
Yep, so that's the annual grant that comes to the 350, well, there's actually 350 this year, it's 351, but cities and towns, the governor and the legislator voted on $2 increase, so it went from $10 per senior to $12, which actually makes a big difference in our little budget, so that was good. The bad thing is that it's still based on the decennial census numbers, so until we have the new census in 2020, and it will reflect that the population in Topsfield is growing, our number's gonna be a little bit lower than it should be, because the actual number of seniors is higher than the number that they're using in that calculation. But that's okay, we can look forward to another little bump, so.
It would help if we had an accurate census.
Yeah, well, that's the federal job to do.
I understand that.
So anyway, so it's higher than it has been. So before you at some point is the acceptance of that grant. So I don't know if anyone has any questions. What I can tell you is that most of that money pays for Peg Beauregard, who's been with us for over 10 years. She's amazing. She's in the cubby. Tracking all of our numbers and does a lot of detail work. She does a lot of other stuff too, as well as just answering calls and just the stuff we all pitch in on. But so it pays her salary, which of course goes up as an employee according to the grid. Although because she's been here so long, she's at the top, so she doesn't get the step increases anymore. So even though the grant money doesn't go up, you know, her salary or wages really goes up. It also pays for our intern. So she's not getting step increases. She gets the COLA increase if there is one. So those 2 numbers go up, but the grant money generally stays the same, except in a year like this when they did decide to vote an increase. So fortunately, we avoided an issue because of that. It also pays for, if we have like a fitness instructor come in, we pay an hourly stipend, that will pay for that. And it will pay for a volunteer event that we have, it can pay for that. It can pay for some different supplies, or like if we had something related to the Dementia Friendly Initiative that we hadn't predicted. And it could pay for something like that. So there's some good latitude, but there are definitely specific categories about how that money can be spent. And Catherine does a great job of working at the 11th hour so that we can make sure that we take advantage of the entire account, because if you leave a balance, then it gets subtracted out of your next year's award. So we don't want to leave a balance. So we work together on making that happen. So before you today is the request to just vote to accept that grant, and then that gets deposited usually in January. They're pretty quick. once everyone gets those in.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the grant, and we'll have time to discuss it.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Anything?
For an amount of $17,796.
Yes.
I only have one question. Where does that $17,796 actually go when we get it?
It goes into a special revenue fund. It does not require further appropriation to spend.
And you can actually spend it, so we don't actually get it until like January, but, you know, Peg's working, you know, year round, so you can spend it ahead of time.
Once we have the award letter, it's one that you can basically put into the red based on the award letter saying that we're getting the money without any type of penalties or negative feedback.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? So we have a motion to approve the contract between the town of Topsfield Council on Aging and the Executive Office of Elder Affairs in the amount of $17,796 for a fiscal year 19 formula grant, which funds are to support COA activities that have been performed. That would be in that fiscal year, and for the chair to sign. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain, because I'm on the board of the COA, so I can't vote.
Okay. Since you're sitting in the hot seat.
I'm actually gonna put Penny in the hot seat for a minute. Penny came as the board chair for many, many years. Come on over, you can literally sit in the hot seat. I warmed it up for you. No sheets.
Well, I just want to say
The agenda?
Yep.
Right here.
Do you want one too?
Sure.
If you want to bring over two.
Oh, that's Route 1.
Thank you.
I just wanted to tell you all how happy we are that we have a permanent home upstairs, that we have had really an enthusiastic response to being here. We're getting more people for activities. We've had over 100 people for all the dinners. The last dinner, the holiday dinner, was just superb. Which was actually catered by Senior Care. So we're actually getting more activity with Senior Care as well. And one of the people that works with us as a volunteer is now going to be on their advisory board and come to our board meetings. So we're going to have even more response. And I really think all this response has to do with us having a permanent home in the town hall. I just think that people see us as a focal point.
That's phenomenal, I appreciate it.
And I
That's
just
great.
and the board is so thrilled, and the friends are so thrilled, and I haven't had any naysaying people come up to me at all. It's actually been reversed.
Great.
Of course, they have to deal with me one-on-one, so, you know.
Whatever works.
But, so, just wanted you all to know.
Thank you.
That's great.
Is there anything, either of you, that you want to talk about your budget?
I'll just come back, yeah, you don't have to do it.
Yeah, just pull the other chair. Using the chairs, you know.
Penny was warming us up.
That's right.
Well, I'll start with the fun stuff. This is hot off the presses, so you can't quite share it yet, because we are not going to get it into the mail until Monday, which means it won't land in mailboxes until Wednesday. We try when we issue a new newsletter, because it is a little competitive to get on the bus. We try to make sure that everyone receives the information at the same time. So sometimes we drop them, like in our senior communities, we drop them instead of having them be mailed out. So we want to make sure that happens on the same day that they're going to land in other people's mailboxes. So everyone has an equal shot of getting in.
And I'd also like to point out that we have, I believe, 7 senior communities at this point, including Littlebrook and Washington Meadows. And we're definitely getting more response from those communities. They are beginning to come out to our different activities, which is also very thrilling.
Yeah, it's really nice. I mean, we just took 20 people down to see the mansions in Newport, and it was a very diverse group. We really work hard to make things affordable and achievable for everyone. It cost $30, and that included the ticket and transportation, and then just whatever food or shopping you wanted to do. But very well received, and we'll probably repeat that trip again as a collaboration with the Historical Society, and then charter a bus, so that does take it up a notch. But what I love is what Penny said, is that we're drawing from a very different groups, and it's just so nice to see everybody mix. I've been in other COAs, and I've seen the separate tables and the cliques. It's like middle school, it's awful. But we don't have any of that. Everyone really, they support each other, you know, they know that this one is having a grandchild, this one's in the hospital, this one, you know, and they help each other out. They're getting together on weekends. So it's really, really rewarding. So I do want to echo Penny's thank you to all of the groups she mentioned for supporting through this process, but for you guys, because I know along the way, every meeting, you kind of had to deal with different changes, and a lot of them probably related to our area. But it is a great space, and we are taking advantage of the other spaces, and I wanted to say, and I think there's a good example just today of how we're all really trying to play nice in the sandbox. Things arose, there were auditors here, the newsletter assembly team was here, there was a holiday party, but we all kind of shuffled around and communicated, and it all worked out. So there's plenty of room for everyone, and I think communication is what's key. And I know Debbie's instrumental in trying to book rooms, and I'm going to try to keep up as much as I can, just so many moving targets. But in the new newsletter, there are a few new activities because we have more time and space. We're able to add, that was always the intention, that everything we've been doing for the last 2 years, we would drop in when we got here, and then we'd start to add. So now we're kind of in that time where we're adding programs. We're adding yoga, a restorative yoga. We want to offer a fitness class as often as we can. So now we have one Monday through Thursday. We're offering something called Speaking of TED. It's based on TED Talks. We have a very curious group of lifelong learners that like to just talk about anything and ask great questions. So they're going to come in on Friday mornings and just kind of have a free-form Friday and just talk about whatever is they're thinking about that day. So I'm excited to see where that conversation goes. And we have some seasoned educators, Kathy Yanchus and Kathy Curran, who are going to help guide that discussion. So I'm really excited to see where that goes. The programs, you know, everything's going to be running here. So on Thursdays at 3, everyone's going to hear a little more noise as they're dancing out dementia, because there's like 25 people up there.
But we know Mark wants us to be noisy. I have really tried to encourage people to be noisy.
Rumor has it we're supposed to be louder, so we're working on it. Actually, yeah, so anyway. So yes, we did have give a little preview to our assembly team today with the new newsletter, and people seem to be very excited, and we actually gave them the book to sign up, which we don't normally do, but since they came in to help us out, we thought that would be a little way to say thank you. So that's all going well. As far as the budget, the impact is, there's not really a significant impact. This is a draft. This is what I turned into Catherine, but she hasn't even had a chance to review it, and we haven't had a chance to talk about it. So let me just hand it around though, so that you can see, and then ask any questions you might have. I can go, I mean, it's pretty short, so I can actually kind of go through the areas that I do.
Thank you. Oh, there we go. Thank you.
All right, so I just went according to the grid to calculate. It's based on, I guess this is 52.4 week year, so I just used those numbers to calculate at the top level. The only thing, and I know this has come up before, and I'm trying to give my best estimate with it, is the van driver's wages. We are offering transportation more often. We have a principal driver who covers Tuesdays through Thursdays, and then we brought on a second driver, and he covers Mondays. Because what we're finding is if we offer a trip on one day and if we offer a shopping shuttle on half a day, it just really cuts into the number of medical appointments we can get people to. So by adding Mondays, that's huge. And people know, so they know that we have a bus on Mondays, so they will schedule their appointments for Mondays. And they will schedule them for Wednesday afternoons because they know the shopping shuttle goes on in the morning. And we really try to adhere to that schedule so that people can do that, because we know how big a deal it is when you have that physical appointment and how hard it is to change it if you have to make a change, or if there's a conflict. So we're trying to be very purposeful and intentional with our, offering of the bus and not change things around and play havoc with people's lives. They're trying to schedule physical therapy appointments and, all kinds of things. So I came up with my best calculation, and then I subtracted out the Title III money that we get through senior care, which currently is $2,438. So we are sure to use that up, so that nothing is left there. And then the appropriation pays for the rest of their wages. So there is an increase there based on the number of hours and, that's what it's really based on, is the number of hours. And then I guess, they get the step increase. So that's what you see there. But other than that, there's nothing really unusual in the top section. And then if you look down below, Catherine's been good about creating line items so it's very clear what things are paying for. So we realized the fire alarm maintenance was something that is an annual fee that we need to pay to keep our bus in compliance. There's obviously vehicle maintenance, that's hard to predict. We've been very lucky, the van's been very reliable, and our principal bus driver does a great job of making sure he gets it in. Paul Wise, who works at the highway department, he assists in that process. So it's been great. It's a 2014 vehicle, and we just took it to Newport, back and forth in a day, and we had no problems. So knock on something. So tracking software's been great. When we came here, the plan was always that we would add a swipe station, which we've done, and the Friends paid for that. What we need to pay for is the maintenance fee, and I know this came up at the FinCom meeting, and I think it was Che that weighed in and said, yeah, that's what you pay. So we're basically paying a reduced rate. The total is $1,200, and that is discounted because the COA board voted to opt for the advertisements. Now, there are no advertisements up there, but they did offer that as an incentive. We provided them with a comprehensive list of local businesses that they can go to. It's not our job to do that. We just give them the list. They can go to those, like Masconomet Healthcare or the Essex County Co-op and see if they want to put an ad on there. And I don't even know what they charge. We stay out of it once we hand over the list. But because we did that, we get the reduced rate. It was a significantly reduced rate for the initial buy-in for the software, and then we get $300 off a year on the maintenance fee. So that's what that $1,200 is. But that's an increase over the previous one because we now have a more complex system. We have the swipe station upstairs, which is working out really well. That helps Peg in the cubby do her job better because she used to have to enter everything manually, and now people are using their tags. And Penny came in to volunteer today, so she puts that down as an hour. It's a big time saver. So like Glenn talking about the permit link, my senior center has been a great addition to our way we do business. Postage has gone down. We have actually, we've trimmed our mailing list. Peg has done that. And we've also gone to an every other month mailing. We were kind of doing it anyway because we were announcing things 2 months out. And with the discussions last year through the budget process, I decided to let's mail 6 times a year. So postage has actually gone down. That's what that is. And then office supplies, I was just kind of looking at the historical data, trying to anticipate things. it's hard to know with the new space, whatever, but, so there's a negative number there. Travel expenses, that includes like the conference. So this past year, there's one conference a year for COA directors, and I didn't go this past year for three reasons. Number one, it was in Falmouth. Number two, it coincided pretty closely to our move. And number three, just we had the Trinity travel expenses in the department because we were going back and forth. So I decided this was the year to take off. Next year it's in Danvers. But to go to that conference, even without staying over, the 3-day conference fee is about $500. It's well worth it. You come out of those things and the networking you've done and just the ideas and the experts you've talked to, it's amazing. It's exhausting, but it's very, very valuable. So I think it's important to keep that in there generally, but so that's what most of that is. And then there'll just be the stray travel expenses if I have to go pick up the newsletter, things like that. I actually a lot of times don't even put it in, but and then the dues, I know that the annual fee is going up. I couldn't find an exact number. I looked hard, but I will get a better number on that as everyone else starts requesting it. So that's it. Nothing crazy. I think it's reasonable. But please fire away questions, because this is good practice for the FinCom.
I have a question, but it's probably bigger than just this, because we're not talking huge sums of money. But the wage increase, is this going to be somewhat consistent? Is this like the average 5.5, pushing 6%, the wage increase
This year,
across the board?
well, we have the classification plan that is impacted by this, and you've also got the 0.4. Last year we had 52 weeks. Previous to that, I think we had 52, sometimes we have 52.2. This year it's a 52.4, which indicates at least another couple of days within the year's pay cycle. So that will show, it will look like it's bigger than normal compared to last year. But that represents, for all non-union employees, the 2% COLA that was adjusted to the grid, and if people are based on performance, if they're eligible for a step, the current grid has a 2.75 difference of steps. So between step 1 and 2 should be a 2.75 difference. So that's all basically in here, and that's the number you're seeing here.
So the 2 plus the 2.75 gives you 4.75, and the difference between that
Is the 0.4.
is it was a flat 52 last year?
Yes. So you'll see that in general across the board, depending on who's getting, some people have maxed out. I think Peg, you said,
Peg's
she's
maxed
at, I think it's 13 steps. So if you're at 13, you don't get another step. Some people, it's not an automatic. You have an evaluation process that you have to go through. So it's not an automatic, but it is part of the grid system that was done. I think we did that in 15. In FY15, we had the pay study, and that was the grid that was adopted. It used to be that those differences from year to year were between 3 and 7%. And so the new grid reduced those to 2.75 across the board. So that'll be, something that we can talk about at another point in terms of other ideas for, I think that it's been time, it's been almost 5 years. I think that it might be the right time to set aside some money for professional services to look at that, to see how far we've been able to achieve progress with our current grid. But for the time being, everyone puts together their budget applications based on what we know today and what is currently in place, which is the grid as approved by the board in FY15 and every subsequent year since then.
Would never have guessed a couple of days would raise
I
it
know.
1.5 points.
Right?
So we kind of jumped in here, let's take a step back just for a second. So the FinCom has issued its guidelines,
Yes.
and they are?
0 for other. And everything else is, if you have a contract in place, you work that in. If the non-union grid is in place, you work that number in. So the guideline is essentially for your departmental other budget, it's a 0. In this case, for example, the COA is a minus 0.68. So they're completely within guidelines within, you know, with that, in that respect.
Can you just go back on the personnel part? Is there a +2 or?
It's
+0?
so what we did is we took the grid and we said to keep up with the market rate, we adjusted the grid by 2%. So even if you don't get a step, at a minimum, everyone will get 2% added to their base rate of pay.
That's what
CO
some people have called the
That's
cost.
COA.
That's everybody.
That's the, what traditionally is called the cost of living
Cost of living.
adjustment.
Oh, that's COA.
Yeah.
You're confused with too many COAs at
Yeah,
once.
too many acronyms.
Oh,
I'm talking about cost of living.
Oh, COL.
COL.
There we go, that's in it now.
The COL, yes.
Thank you, I just didn't want to skip over that part.
So we have an increase here, for example, on the van drivers of this 10%. Now, is this when you were talking about the Monday thing and all? So that's not within guidelines then, correct?
Right, so I'm gonna have, I've written things up and I'll have evidence. I've got a long equation that I wrote out to explain that, and I will answer more questions about that.
Okay,
On
and you can
our
get
end,
that
but
to
what's,
us too?
what's,
Yeah.
I'm being consistent, and on our end, what's helpful, and I knows this person just to
Yep.
flag that somewhere, or another, not that it's not needed or not valuable, or,
Yep.
you know, but just to point out to us, these are the over guidelines.
Okay, yep.
You want to use a different color, you want to use a little.
Well, what we did do is we used, is it B2?
As, yes, B1 and B2, that would be a
B1 and
B1.
B2. So-
B1 is being personnel.
So that's what we did, and we'll talk about that a little later. So you want to call out your baseline services, status quo, and then your B2 or one of those other forms is going to say an increase of 5 hours a week for the bus driver at $20 an hour at 52.4 weeks equals this amount. So there'd be a separate worksheet for that.
Right, and I actually did even an additional worksheet with my calculations. And I'm happy to share those, and I know I will share those with the FinCom. But that's where I tried to factor in the grid changes, the hour changes, take out the Title III, and then come up with that right number, which then of course does end up being a little over guideline. But I really wanted to try to get a pure number, and then we'll go back from there. Now, do I think it's gonna come in below that in actuality, looking at the years pre? So I looked at the prior years. I know we've added some, but I don't think that what we've added is that much of a percentage increase. So I think in reality, the final number is gonna be lower than that, but I just didn't wanna get to June and be out of hours for our drivers. So I
Yeah,
went
we
with,
need to talk about what you need to talk about. It's
Yeah.
just the flagging helps us just
Yep.
know where it is.
yeah, and I have all that prepared.
So just to be clear, I'm sorry,
No,
this
no,
is
no,
to carry on. So just to be clear, Catherine, so when you do a revised budget with Paula, how will you be handling this? Should it be segregated completely from this personnel sheet because it represents an increase in busing hours? So it's kept separate, or does she leave it as is?
For
For
the,
the increase in the bus hours, the
So
busing
that's-
hours?
similar to the way we did it last year, is I'll be emailing the spreadsheet that has all, for the entire town, which will show everything, and then there'll be a separate spreadsheet for above guidelines. And this year, same as last year actually, it'll be broken up into the 4 categories: fixed charges, contractual, additional funds needed, or essential, beneficial, and unfunded, which is basically new items. So people are being asked to submit those, identifying which of those it is, if it's a contractual thing or if it's something that's new. So you'll get that as well. In addition, in terms of, for every department budget, you'll get an email of their budget, which will at least be 3 forms, which is what they submitted as departmental requests, the B1, which is for payroll and salary, and then the B2, which for other expenses.
So just to kind of clarify, that's fine, but, so we're not at that point yet, so
No,
I don't mean this sarcastically.
No, I still have a question.
What are we doing today, why are we doing, what are we doing, what's the purpose of today's discussion?
Today is to point out all of those things that should be flagged to you that represent different, it's not status quo. So today is COA is proposing that there be an increase in the amount of hours that we have for COA busing. The impact of that, based on status quo compared to that, might be, what do you think, is it $2,000 for the increased busing cost?
It's, according to my calculation, it's $15.33.57, so
So
about
$1,500.
Okay, so today's just to give us a heads up to start the tuning.
Yes.
And then hopefully, when we get to the point of seeing it the way you've got it structured, it
Yeah.
will either be, it will be consistent unless some event has occurred. So
Right.
it'll be, okay. that's-
Most of the departments have submitted budgets already. They're mostly due tomorrow, though, the bigger departments especially. So they're working out the final details of their budgets, and they're basically here to meet with you, check in, to see if you know, if you have strong objections to what their plans are, if they need to, you know, sit down at the drawing board tonight. But, you know, it's preliminary.
Yeah, that's
So-
interesting, but it's, okay, and then, I know, years ago, I think the good news is, we've been using relatively the same process for our
Yes.
But it used to be, people would submit the budget to the person in the opposition, and nothing was, veritably, nothing was in the right place, and nothing was in the right category. So you still do screening, if it comes in on Form B, but it should be on Form C, or?
Yeah, I have been meeting with the departments nonstop this week in terms of people asking questions of where to put things, trying to keep things as consistent as possible. The other thing that we really kind of drill into department heads is if they're making any changes, that, you know, just as a central point, that it does go through my office first, and then we filter it out at the same time as it's going through the FinCom liaison. So to try to keep those consistencies so that you're not all looking at different numbers once we get to
Yeah.
the final budget, which we're looking at passing that out, and I believe January 3rd is our timeframe for that.
Not to be simplistic, but we need to look at apples with apples and oranges.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
I'm gonna sneak in another general question, that has nothing to
okay.
do with you guys particularly. This has come to me like from 3 different places, and I just wanna make sure I'm giving the right answer. Budgets are passed and the year goes on, and I'm just using this as an example.
That's
right?
fine.
And office supplies has run out of money and needs, a certain department's office supplies, which is one line item, right? Has run out of money, but their travel expenses have extra money.
Right.
Okay, what's required for that level of a transfer?
There isn't anything required. The way the budgets are voted, it's the bottom line in each category.
Okay, great, that's what I
So
wanted
at
to
this
make sure.
point, salary and
That's the
wages
answer.
is
That's what I-
combined. And then so the salary and wages and other.
Yeah.
So they're voted
That's the
twice.
town meeting level.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this year in the budget, you'll get the expenses for the FY, I think 16, 17, 18. You'll get year-to-date, so 6 months worth of expenses for 19.
Yep.
And then you'll get what they're asking for 20.
Okay, so then
So you'll have
in
some
real
history.
life, let's just say that was you, I'm not saying you will spend that, and you wanted to do that. Paula could just do that, Paula would talk to you,
No, Paula should go to the COA board and tell them, because they're the people who sign the warrants, which money goes to this, money goes to that. And so if they're signing off more than is in here, they shouldn't do that without having approved it.
yeah, that's okay, but I'm trying to do it on the bookkeeping side.
There's
okay?
not,
bookkeeping-
there's not a
bookkeeping.
formal process for that, as long as
Oh.
they don't go over the bottom line
In the big category.
in the big categories.
yes.
Then that's all, that's the only place that we would flag it.
But the process is within the department,
To get the.
Board,
Well, I
commission,
think
That's
she
what
should go to the
Whatever it is.
COA to get
It's
approval,
true.
and once she got approval, then she can go to Catherine and take
But
care
it's
of it.
not,
Just like
FinCom
highway.
doesn't need to do it, we don't need to do
Goes
it,
to
town
highway
meeting doesn't need to do
No,
it.
but we, Paula and I and Penny and the board have a very good working relationship where they'll come to me and say, you know, we'd really like to do this, it's gonna cost this amount of money, and we will like troubleshoot and say, well, could the grant handle that if we could do this instead? Or, well, why exactly do you need that? Is this the year to be doing that, or could we wait till next year? Or yada yada. So we work together very well. I don't want to give the impression that if Penny wanted to raise this budget by $100,000, that because she's on the, right, because you're on that board, that you're going to be able to dictate to the rest of the world that that's the change. It's more of a collaborative process by which Penny might have said, hey, you know, a lot of people are complaining that the bus isn't available on Wednesday. could we offer it another day? Could we as a board talk about the importance of that being added into the next budget request? And then Paula can take that information, and she's giving it to us now, and you as the appointing authority of the Board of, or the Council on Aging, can then say, we agree with that or we don't, or we agree with it and we want that to go over to the FinCom. So this is about the Board of Selectmen having a role in that.
We'll probably all be happy to know that at least one other town considers that level of change to be a line item transfer. And it
Yes.
has to be
And it's-
approved at FinCom meetings.
That is
And they sit there
horrible.
for hours, and that's why I'm checking.
Horrible.
Somebody said that to me, and I was like, oh, am I confused? I don't think.
Are they on a little island in the middle of,
Not
No.
far away, I'm just telling you, but, okay, thank you, I just wanted to make sure I was.
Yes.
So Catherine, there are only two categories then? So there's wages and everything else?
No, salary.
Salary and
Salary.
wages.
Salary
Yeah,
and wages,
three of
then
them.
those two categories, salary and wages is together as one.
And
So
then
that's
other.
changed 2 years ago now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then other.
Everything else is
other,
there.
other towns call it personnel and non-personnel.
Yeah.
So it's either the people
Could be.
or it's the stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, thank you.
So the way we had done in the past was, it was required for each department to come in with a budget that was within guidelines. That's what you needed to submit, and then you put in the things that you want other than, in addition to that, if you have an addition. We're not doing that
Yeah,
anymore?
we
then?
are.
Or is this
That's
like an
what,
interim?
that's what we're talking about, this is just, that was the whole point, that this is just an early sheet that you gave us. And then
Yeah,
if they've
this is your
already-
worksheet.
My wish list.
I just wanna know that it's your worksheet, okay.
Yeah, that's what
So,
we're trying to.
so then, maybe Catherine can help me with it, maybe you can. The numbers here for other are a bit of an issue. If
So
I
if-
try to figure out how much is over or under, in other words, the column that's FY '20, increase, decrease, just for the others, it's about an increase of 1,500, and the positives are like 1,600, and then the reductions are about 500. The 440 is not a right amount.
Right, so the formula is, what happened here is, I think when she was putting together her budget, is, these are the departmental requests. This is a form that I sent to them, that they've since have altered and have given hard copies back to
They
me.
fill in certain columns, they've altered
Right.
it, they fill in certain
So
columns.
I think by altering this form, that the formula is not carrying on this. So, but the numbers are right in terms of the columns. But yes, if you were to look at the FY '20 increases and decreases, it works out to be $1,070 and not
Yeah, it's
negative
not
440. Yeah,
Okay.
Right, right.
So, but the reason is because in part, we're talking about how much increase or non-increase in the budget. And we had that, somebody said it was only a 0.68 or whatever increase. That's not true, is what you're saying. There's a mistake in the formula. You're gonna get that straightened
Right.
out, and that will have an effect
So
on.
what you'll see on this is, so some people move things around, and we ask people to move things around to make them more consistent in terms of what they're spending. For instance, if they are spending, in this case, say she's spending $675 regularly in travel expense, she may take 25 out of one and put it into that one. So it has a net increase of 0. Those you'll see on the budget when you get it. Everything else, what makes up this $1,070 will end up on the on the other sheet, the over guideline sheet that is what you work off of in terms of making decisions. When you get the final budget for the other category, anything that's above and beyond 0 based on the guidelines will go on a separate sheet for the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen to work off of.
Which is the point I was also trying, I think we're trying to make the same point. That's why I was clarifying, this is just preliminary, just to give it a heads up. Honestly, no disrespect to all department heads, I don't wanna see their math. I wanna see it
Right.
after it goes to you.
Right, like I
and then it
said, this
comes back
budget's
out.
not due
Yeah.
until tomorrow, and given the holiday, they could turn into me as
That's right, as long as
next
we all
Wednesday
know where we
morning.
are.
Right.
Yeah, and then, I'll have a week to work these out and go back to the department heads and turn them over to all you folks.
Okay, anything further for the COA? We all set to move along here, we just wanna kind of get the feeling from a few of our departments. Thank you both for
Thank you.
for your kind
Thank you.
And that will be the same with the fire department. I know they have one item listed right now. The police department, I haven't even seen their budget yet, so I'll see theirs at the same time that you do for the
It's
first
not time
round.
for us to dive too deeply, we just.
Right.
Yes, yeah.
Get a general sense of where things are going with the budget process based on these particular departments. So So if there's a department that's not here, that's good news. It means that they're within guidelines. They didn't feel the need to have to come under our,
But it's
under
on
the
the
Board of
level of a
Selectmen.
narrative, we're not, get a little nervous when you and the police chief meet at the
Well, I
same
just-
time,
yeah.
but
I just looked at the highway department budget this week, and that right-hand column is all zeros. That's why they're not here.
On this one, Catherine.
Well, no, they're not here
the
because they don't
increase
report to
in
the Board of
software
Selectmen.
Well,
go on a
that's
separate sheet, because that's not business as usual, that was an increase.
Yes.
And then the number of hours for the driver would go.
But that's good to know.
Too, yes,
Okay.
yeah.
And that would show us really apples to apples for
But
last
not-
year.
Well, the only
Not
one,
this
the
one.
only
Not the
numbers on
contractual
their
ones.
Right,
budget
and those
was
would be incorporated.
Yeah, yeah, because she
out
was
of,
asking for
well, it wasn't
additional
out of
hours.
guideline because it was based
All right,
on.
let's go back to the
Contract
driver
driver.
meeting here.
The driver.
Hello? I know it's holiday season. Alright, so we just clarified, we've been brought up to speed that we're at a very preliminary point in this, and that we're not doing debits and credits yet, and that you're just giving us some heads up as to what we're
Yes,
doing.
that sounds great. That sounds
Go right ahead.
so exciting.
So you're not gonna get burned tonight.
So it's
No pun intended.
I've never heard that before.
Oh, you know how to make the fire hose laugh.
Okay, good evening.
Good
Afternoon. Thank you for having me. And I just want to first of all thank everyone for your support. The new A2 is here, getting brought up to speed so it can get put in service. I want to thank Catherine and Susan and Kelly for their help with myself and the budget. And really trying to think out of the box. I believe this is a really pivotal year for the Topsfield Fire Department. We have